Well, if you buy a classic car, chances are under hood there's going to be a V8 engine. And there are many great V8 engines produced by the domestic auto companies over the years. And what I'm going to try to do in this video is nominate my top 3 most reliable and enjoyable classic car V8 engines. Now, this is a pretty tough list, and a lot of engines could make this, but I'm trying to make the list with what I feel are the most reliable, and I'll provide appropriate justification for why I selected these particular engines. Feel free to disagree and, in fact, put a comment in the comment section with your agreement or your disagreement. And I've also picked one from each of the major automakers, from GM, from Ford, from Chrysler. I didn't pick anything from AMC, although I would just say all of the AMC V8 engines are excellent. The 304, the 360, the 390, the 401, and other variants thereof that they produced of the AMC V8. But those are also great engines. But we're going to focus today on GM, Ford, and Chrysler offerings. So let's start with General Motors. And what I have here is the Cadillac 472 and 500 cubic inch V8. Now, the Cadillac 472 was introduced in the 1968 model year, and back then it was a premium fuel, high compression engine. So was the 500 cubic inch V8 when it was introduced in 1970. And in fact, that 500 cubic inch V8 engine for that 1 year only was a high compression engine and made 400 gross horsepower. It was extremely peppy. I've driven a 1970 Eldorado with it, and it was, well, despite the fact that it was a heavy car, it really moved with some great speed. So why did I pick the Cadillac V8 over all the other GM divisions and engines? You have Chevrolet small blocks, of course. You have Chevrolet big blocks. You've got Pontiac, well, there's not really a Pontiac small block. There's shorter deck Pontiac engines, the 265 and 301 from 1980 and 81. Otherwise, you have the same physical size Pontiac V8s from 326 to 455 cubic inches. You, of course, have the Oldsmobile small and big blocks. You have the Buick small and big blocks. Then you have the Cadillac V8. Well, let me first start by saying some people will say, well, how could I not pick the Chevrolet small block? Well, that's because there are some variants, even the 350s, that for some period in the late 1970s and early 1980s, they did have soft camshafts. And in particular, I would say the 305s were the ones that really suffered from this. And as a consequence, despite the fact that the 350, by and large, is an excellent engine, there were some years where they just weren't quite the same. If you get a 350 from, let's say, the mid-1970s or earlier, you're in good shape. If you get one from, let's call it the mid-80s and newer, you're in great shape. But that's one reason I didn't put the 350 on here. The other is because on a lot of the 350s, the water pumps don't last very long. They tend to last maybe 40, 50,000 miles, and then those tend to go out. So I didn't put the Chevrolet 350 on here. The Pontiac V8s, well, I would say in general, those are great engines too. They were most known for eating the plastic camshaft timing gears. And while other GM divisions use those, and in fact, other companies, even Ford and Chrysler, used similar plastic camshaft gears and timing sets, the Pontiac V8 engine, for whatever reason, seemingly just used to eat them up at about 40 to 50,000 miles in some cases. And so that's something to look out for. And one of the reasons why the Pontiac didn't make the list. The Olds V8 is close. The Olds V8s are excellent, excellent engines. But the only thing that I can say about the Olds V8 and why I didn't pick it over the Cadillac is they did have a couple more issues with them, I would say. Water pumps, and really that's about it. But I would put the Olds V8 as my second favorite in terms of most reliable from the General. Then the Buick V8, again, great engine, but Buick V8s did in some cases have oil pump issues, and the small blocks in particular of the Buick had a tendency in some cases to blow up. They had a little bit weaker lower end. So the Buicks, again, are generally really good engines, but not the most reliable. So the Cadillac V8 and the 472 and 500 cubic inches are the ones that make the list, because they are so smooth, so velvety smooth, and they're absolutely bulletproof. Even the water pumps on these engines seem to last forever, at least compared to other General Motors divisions. Sometimes you have the timing gear issue that I was mentioning before, but that's pretty rare. These engines just keep running and running and running and doing so smoothly. Of course, my favorite variants are the ones that were produced from 1968 to 1970 because they were high compression. But even after that, and all the way through 1976, they were just great engines. When it became the 425, the bottom end did get a little bit weaker, but they were still good engines in the 368. But the Cadillac 472 and 500, no matter what particular car they're in, they just move the car very well. They are whisper silent. They are extremely smooth. And like I said, I really can't think of a fault with them other than they're not high RPM revving engines. They're not 4-bolt main engines. They're not racing engines, but they are extremely durable. They did use a lot of nickel as well in the blocks, and as a consequence, the cylinder walls are very hard, and these engines will last an extremely long period of time. So that's why the Cadillac V8 is the one that I'm going to select from the General over all the others. And admittedly, General Motors produced some great V8 engines, but I have to say the Cadillac is at least my nomination for the most reliable as well as enjoyable. Let's move on to Ford Motor Company. Now, this was a bit of a tough one, but I am going to nominate the 429 cubic inch 385 series engine. And this was produced beginning in the 1968 model year on the Thunderbirds, although I'm not going to nominate that particular variant of the 429 because it came with the Motorcraft 4300 4-barrel carburetor, which, if you are a fan of this channel, you know is just junk, absolute junk in terms of a carburetor. And I'm going to nominate the 429 cubic inch 2 Venturi or 2-barrel variants. And you would most commonly find these in Mercury's. You could also find them in Fords as well. And you say a 2-barrel carburetor, or a 2 Venturi as Ford like to call it, carburetor on a 429 cubic inch engine? Sure, why not? I mean, General Motors had 455s with 2-barrel V8s. Buick did, Oldsmobile did, Pontiac did. Yeah, no big deal. And I have to say, owning a 429 cubic inch 2-barrel V8 from Ford, it's just an absolute gem. The Autolite 2100 carburetor, yeah, it does wheeze a little bit at high RPM, but it's extremely reliable. It's so easy to service. You can, if you ever have to change the needle and seat or the float, or you want to examine the car while it's running, you basically can do that. Take the top of the carburetor and you can run the engine, and you can, with just a couple screws, take that top off and you're ready to work, ready to replace any needle and seat or float. The accelerator pump is external on the 2100. So you have 4 little screws, take those out, replace the accelerator pump, good to go again. It's just a beautiful carburetor, and consequently, it's a great complement to the 429, despite the fact that it's only a 2 Venturi carburetor as opposed to a 4 Venturi carburetor. If you wanted the most reliable V8 from Ford, you definitely did not go with anything that had the Motorcraft 4300 carburetor on it. They are just notorious for flooding out and having drivability issues and seeping. And I say this as somebody who, well, let's just say, runs quite a few of them in his cars. But any car that I've had that came with an Edelbrock on it or some aftermarket carburetor that replaced the Motorcraft, I've kept on it. And that just tells you what I think of the Motorcraft. The other thing with the Motorcraft, I think because they tended to flood out relatively easily, the oil in the cars where the carburetor would flood out would thin out, and then that would obviously reduce the longevity of the engine because now you have gas diluting the oil. So you do have to be careful on your cars equipped with that Motorcraft 4300 that didn't happen to them. So be on the lookout for a late 60s, 1970, let's say, model year Mercury or Ford with a 429 cubic inch 2 Venturi V8, because that is my nomination for Ford's, the most reliable Ford engine. The 385 series V8s are extremely long lasting. And Ford produced the 460 cubic inch variant all the way into the 1990s. By the way, the 385 series, that name comes from the 3.85 inch stroke of the 460. The 429 does not share that stroke, but that's where that name comes from. These engines will last forever. They are super smooth and quiet, especially the high compression 429s that I mentioned. And with the 2-barrel carburetor, well, they're reliable, they're pleasant, they're just everything that you want. Don't think that they're going to be a dog. They really are an absolute gem. And now let's go over to the Mopar side of the house. Now this, I admittedly have to say, is really, really tough. But I'm going to go with the 440 cubic inch V8s, and specifically the ones from 1972 and earlier because they have the forged crankshaft. Now the only thing about the Motorcraft 440s that I can kind of, let's say, ding a little bit is that they came stock with a Holley 4-barrel carburetor in many years. They also had the Carter Thermoquad. And I wouldn't say that those carburetors were absolutely reliable. And the other issue with the 440s was they came often with Chrysler's electronic ignition system or ballast resistor system. And unfortunately, while the engine itself was fantastic, the electronic ignition wasn't great. The carburetors were okay. And the plugs that they used, the Champion spark plugs or Prestolite plugs that came with Chryslers, were also not great. And they had a lot of drivability issues. So that really applied to any Chrysler engine. A lot of Champion plugs were employed and Prestolite plugs were employed as standard equipment on Chryslers. The ballast resistor applied to all of them. So it's really tough to pick. If I had to, but the 440 is admittedly extremely enjoyable, especially, again, in high compression form. But in any form, it's just great. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, I have to say the 318 engine from Chrysler, while maybe not as enjoyable, is absolutely reliable, extremely long-lasting. I just wish in some cases it had a little bit more power, but it was topped with a Carter 2-barrel carburetor that, again, was pretty bulletproof. So it's a bit of a toss-up between the 440 and 318. I would say the 318 probably had less issues than the 440 because of its more simple Carter carburetor, but I'm going to go with the 440 regardless. So what do you think of this particular list? As I mentioned, from an AMC standpoint, any of the V8s that they made were good, so there's not really anything to nominate. There were different sizes, and there were also different variants over the years, but Chrysler, they had quite a few different V8s over the years, even the old school Hemi V8s, the newer Hemi V8s. Chrysler in general just made some excellent engines. But this would be my nomination for GM, Ford, and Chrysler, the most reliable variants and enjoyable. The Cadillac V8 472-500 from GM, the 429 2-barrel from Ford, and then the Chrysler 440. What do you think? Did I pick the right ones? I should caveat for Chrysler, forget about the 440s with the lean burn system. So we'll just throw those in the dust heap. Again, pre-1972, let's just say, 440 cubic inch V8s. And I'll also say when it comes to the Cadillac V8 variants, let's please forget about the fuel-injected versions that were offered of the 500 cubic inch V8. Those, well, stick with the carbureted variants. Thanks again for watching.